It is a difficult task to try and give someone who often is only curious, if not indifferent, an idea of that which for which you hold as the most precious thing, the jewel of jewels. There are two dangers to be avoided. The first is to let your heart run away with you, to write an account so enthusiastic, so extravagant, that one gets the impression of having before him a product of an unbalanced mind, or at least of a rank sentimentalist, and consequently hurries through the article with an amused smile full of ironic pity. The other danger would be to endeavor to remain completely cold and detached, to write like an impartial observer. This would be even worse, because one cannot speak of Ma, who is the very embodiment of love divine, as if one were dealing with a scientific problem. I shall therefore try to restrain my heart without, however, reducing it to complete silence. It is bad taste to talk about oneself, but all I can do is to relate the story of how I got in touch with Ma, for it is impossible to describe her objectively. She is different for every one of us, and as she often said, I am whatever you think I am. Having provisionally placed a substitute in charge of my medical practice, I had left France in quest of spiritual guidance and went to India, which since time immemorial has illumined the world. I originally came on a steamship to see Ramana Maharshi, but learned of his death just before the ship set sail. I then thought of visiting Sri Aurobindo, but he died while I was on the ship. I did go to Patanjali to Aurobindo's ashram, and upon my arrival, as I had said, I went to India in search of a real guru, not just a teacher, but one of those mysterious great beings who can, by their mere presence, awaken in us the inner power which makes real sadhana possible. Landing in Buddhist Ceylon, which is now Sri Lanka, then proceeding along the east coast of India, I had arrived in Benares the previous day. Tired and disappointed, almost convinced that my journey had been in vain because of the passing of two great sages, and determined to return to France, I had already reserved a berth on a ship which was to sail from Colombo in Sri Lanka on 21st February. But miracles still happen nowadays, and sometimes the most wild dreams become true. And this is what happened to me when I met Sri Ma Anandamayi for the first time on the 2nd of February 1951 at her Varanasi ashram. I knew nothing about Sri Ma Anandamayi. The first time her name was mentioned before me was at Aurobindo ashram in Patanjali. One Canadian lady who was coming from northern India advised me to visit the ashram of Sri Ma Anandamayi, which was beautifully nestled on the bank of the Ganges, and to have the darshan of Sri Ma. But it did not awaken in me any interest. But nevertheless, I noted her name, among other things worthwhile to see in Benares. And anyhow, I had already lost any hope of finding the sage I was looking for. When I reached Varanasi on the 1st of February and got my accommodation at the Kark Hotel near the cantonment station, the next day in the afternoon, a young man accompanied me to Baidani area of the town. We crossed a narrow lane, entered through a small door, and found us all of a sudden in the vast, majestic ashram overlooking the Ganges, with a breathtaking view along the Ghats. It was the ashram of Sri Ma Anandamayi. My first idea was to have a look and go away, but Sri Ma was just coming out from the Kanyapith building. My companion introduced me to her. They were talking in Bengali. The young man told me, Ma says you are good. She was looking at me with the strange look which is so familiar to me now. She looks at you but also far beyond, in your past, your future, your whole destiny. Can I recollect my first impression? Surprise, I believe. I expected to see an old lady with white hair, but I found myself before a person looking fairly young with her jet black hair falling on her shoulders. But surprisingly, I did not notice her beauty at that time. I found myself in the presence of a woman of 55-ish, looking younger than her age and quite beautiful. But at that moment, I did not notice the beauty. It was only later that I became aware of it. I still see her, focusing her eyes on me with that strange gaze that seemed to embrace my whole destiny. And I am frequently asked what was my first impression of Ma and what made me decide to leave everything, family and friends, country, profession, and wealth, to follow her. Why I have clung to her like a shadow for all these times, suffering torments whenever I am unable to see her for a few hours. Why, though I cannot understand what she says, I spend hours at her feet without taking my eyes off her. But it is very difficult to reply to these questions, not because language lacks words, but because a word has not the same meaning for different persons, unless they have all experienced the sensation corresponding to that word. Thus, one may well try with the aid of comparisons to make a child in France realize what exactly is the flavor of a mango. Even if one spent hours over it, he would only get a very vague idea, and that also most likely false. All the same, having made room for all these unavoidable limitations, I shall now make an attempt. It was the evening of the 2nd of February. That same evening at about 10 o'clock, she had granted me an interview which lasted for about 20 minutes. She was supposed to answer my questions, but I had nothing to ask. I simply desired to make a spiritual contact. She seemed to divine thought. It was she who put the questions, clear, precise, going straight to the heart of things, raising exactly the points which interested me. But her words were only a play on the surface. In those 20 minutes, she had infused something into me, which was to last for a long time and which still continues. I returned to Clark's hotel after having secured her permission to come back the next day to live in the ashram. I was in a strange state. My heart swelled with jubilation, with joyful exaltation, the state of one who has just found what he has always yearned for in its most secret recess. Her image did not leave me anymore, even at night, and the very thought of her drove tears into my eyes. What exactly had happened to me? My critical sense, which had been submerged by the first wave, awoke on the 3rd or 4th day. It told me, "Take care. You have fallen into the hands of a great magician. She has cast a spell over you to make you her obedient slave." And I began to be on the defensive, to struggle against her influence. But that was a rather feeble attempt, I confess, for how can one fight love? There is no power in the world mightier than love. But what kind of love was this? It is not directed towards the woman. It has nothing whatsoever to do with the love one may feel for a woman. As for strange alchemy, my entire potentiality for affection, all that one can love and admire in the world, was transferred to her. But at the same time, this love became so pure, so sublimated, that it merged into and greatly intensified the call for the absolute that I had always felt. All worldly attachment lost its attraction, and the spiritual ascent became easier, since she had donned me the wings of love. For these 11 months that I have spent near her have given me the conviction that she is the Lord himself, incarnate in the body of a woman. I thought that this love, and I am obliged to use the word for want of a better term, though it does not express exactly what it stands for, that it would disappear or at least dwindle with time. But the very contrary has happened. It has only grown in intensity, for love is like the ancient cities buried underground. As one delves deeper, ever more new marvels are brought to light. Something that has struck me from the very first day is the atmosphere of the miraculous in which one moves when one is with her. In Europe, and no doubt here also, by the word miracle, one conceives of a breaking away from the laws of nature, something that strikes one as impossible, as absurd. But this is only its crude objective side. Its subtle subjective aspect is quite different. What does it matter to me if a certain yogi has walked across the waters or flown through the air? The real miracle is when that which one needs, which one desires keenly or feebly, comes at the very moment it is needed. And still better when it comes not only as one desired it, but as one would have loved to see it in the innermost depth of one's heart. It has been for me as if I were guided on a path beset with obstacles by the hand of the most loving mother, an all-powerful mother. As you advance, she removes all which must be removed. She even lifts you across in her arms. And all circumstances adjust and adapt themselves with a marvelous precision and without hurt. Coincidence, I thought at first. But a coincidence that goes on repeating itself daily cannot be called so anymore. And all this happens without apparently violating the laws of nature. For the Lord has no need to break any laws, for he is the law. Should I need to give any examples? No. For those who do not know Ma, they will not believe me, and those who have lived near her have already understood. She is like the Ganges. The very touch purifies. In her presence, one feels oneself getting better all the time, not by the suppression of one's faults. The very fault is sublimated and becomes an aid in the search for the divine. She does not seem to notice or does not notice the dark sides of the individual. She only sees our luminous aspects, enhanced considerably by Ma's divine mercy.